Let me show you something worth noticing. There's a moment that happens to almost everyone who's trying to build wealth. You make a good decision. You know it's good because the numbers say so, because the logic is clear, because every rational voice in your head agrees. And then you feel terrible about it. Not a little uncomfortable, actually bad. Like you've done something wrong even though you haven't. I'm talking about the feeling you get when you max out your retirement account instead of buying something you can see, or when you keep driving your paid-off car while your coworker shows up in something new, or when you say no to a vacation everyone else is taking because you're prioritizing your emergency fund. The decision is sound, but something inside you protests. This isn't about discipline failing. It's not about willpower running out. It's something deeper and stranger than that. Your brain is sending you an alarm signal about a decision that's actually helping you. And until you understand why that happens, you'll keep fighting yourself every time you try to do the sensible thing. Let's start with what most people don't realize. Your emotional system wasn't designed for long-term financial planning. It was designed for immediate survival. For most of human history, waiting to enjoy resources didn't make sense. If you found food, you ate it. If you had shelter, you used it. If you had something valuable, you displayed it or shared it because that created social bonds you needed to survive. Delayed gratification is a modern construct, a relatively recent idea that only makes sense in a world with stable institutions, reliable futures, and complex financial instruments. Your emotional wiring is still running on much older software. So when you transfer money into an investment account, your brain doesn't register that as gaining something. It registers it as losing something. The money disappears from your checking account. You can't see it, can't touch it, can't use it. As far as your emotional system is concerned, it's just gone. And loss feels bad. It's supposed to. Loss avoidance kept your ancestors alive. The fact that this money is growing in an index fund somewhere doesn't compute emotionally. That's an abstraction, a future possibility. Your emotional system doesn't traffic in future possibilities. It traffics in present realities. And the present reality is that you just made your available resources smaller. Now, add in the social layer. Because this doesn't happen in isolation. You're making these decisions while watching other people make different ones. Your coworker gets the new car. Your friend books the trip. Your neighbor renovates their kitchen. And you're sitting there with your spreadsheet and your retirement calculator feeling like you're missing something. This is where it gets psychologically complicated. Because they look happy. They probably are happy, at least in that moment. The new car does feel good. The vacation does create memories. The kitchen renovation does improve their daily life. Those aren't illusions. Those are real experiences. And you're choosing not to have those experiences. Not because you can't afford them necessarily, but because you're playing a different game. A longer game, a game where the rewards are distant and abstract and completely invisible to everyone around you. So your brain starts asking questions. Reasonable questions, actually. Why are you depriving yourself? What's the point of having money if you don't use it? What if you're sacrificing present happiness for a future that might not come? What if everyone else knows something you don't? These aren't irrational thoughts. They're your mind trying to protect you from what it perceives as a mistake. From its perspective, you are making a mistake. You're choosing invisible future possibilities over tangible present opportunities. That genuinely looks wrong to the part of your brain that's trying to keep you safe and satisfied. Here's what makes it even harder. The right financial decisions often feel like nothing. They're boring, unsexy, anticlimactic. You set up an automatic transfer. You don't buy something. You keep doing what you're already doing. There's no moment of arrival, no dramatic transformation, no instant where everything changes and you feel different. Meanwhile, the wrong decisions often feel amazing. They come with a hit of dopamine, a sense of progress, a visible change in your life. Your brain rewards you immediately. That's not a flaw in the system. That's the system working exactly as designed. Immediate rewards feel good because they used to mean survival. You're trying to override millions of years of evolutionary programming with a spreadsheet. And you wonder why it feels difficult. Let's be specific about what this looks like in practice. You're at a restaurant. Not a special occasion, just a regular dinner. You look at the menu and you see something you want. It costs more than you usually spend. Not dramatically more. Manageable, but more. And you have this internal negotiation. Part of you says it's fine, you work hard, you deserve it, it's not that much money in the grand scheme of things. Another part reminds you that you're trying to save more, that these small amounts add up, that this isn't aligned with your goals. You end up ordering something cheaper. The food comes, and it's fine, but you're not fully satisfied. You feel like you denied yourself something for a reason you can't quite see in the moment. Now multiply that by 1,000 decisions over a year. Each one is small. Each one is manageable. Each one is the right choice by the numbers. And each one extracts a tiny psychological cost. Because you're constantly swimming against your emotional current. The people who don't feel this tension either aren't making the difficult choices or they've found a way to reframe what's happening. Most people are in the first category. They follow their emotional impulses, buy what feels good, and deal with the consequences later. That's the path of least resistance. That's what feels natural. The minority who build wealth without constant internal warfare have usually found a mental model that makes saving feel like winning instead of losing. They've managed to rewire the emotional reward. Not completely, not permanently, but enough that the right decision doesn't feel like self-punishment. One version of this is learning to get satisfaction from the numbers themselves. Some people genuinely enjoy watching their net worth increase. They check their accounts and feel a sense of progress. They've trained themselves to get a dopamine hit from seeing the balance grow instead of from spending. That works for some personalities. If you're wired that way, you've got a massive advantage, but most people aren't. Most people don't get excited about numbers in an account. They get excited about experiences and possessions and changes they can perceive, which means they need a different approach. Another model is thinking of your current self and your future self as two different people. Your current self wants things now. Your future self will want things later. And you're constantly negotiating between them. When you save money, you're not depriving yourself. You're sending resources to your future self. You're being generous to a person who will exist and who will thank you for what you did. This sounds like a mental trick because it is a mental trick, but it's a useful one. It creates psychological distance between the action and the reward. It lets you frame saving as giving rather than restricting. Giving feels better than restricting. It doesn't feel as good as spending on yourself right now, but it feels better than just losing the money into a void. Some people think about money in terms of freedom instead of stuff. Every dollar they save isn't something they can't spend. It's a small piece of independence, a tiny increment of future optionality. They're not sacrificing, they're building. This reframe works better for people who value autonomy over accumulation, who care more about what they might be able to say no to someday than what they can say yes to today. None of these models are objectively true. Money is money. Savings are savings. What you're doing with it is the same regardless of how you think about it. But the internal experience is completely different depending on which lens you use, and the internal experience determines whether you can actually sustain the behavior. Because here's the thing nobody talks about. You can know all the right answers and still fail at this. You can understand compound interest intellectually and still struggle to act on it emotionally. Knowledge doesn't override feeling, not automatically, not without deliberate effort. The financial advice industry mostly ignores this. They give you the math, show you the projections, explain the logic, and then act surprised when people don't follow through. As if information was the missing ingredient, as if people are failing because they don't understand that saving more leads to having more later. Everyone understands that. The problem isn't comprehension, it's execution. And execution fails when the emotional cost is too high. You need the math to know what to do, but you need the psychological model to actually do it without feeling miserable. Most people only get the first part. They optimize their portfolio and hate every minute of living below their means. That's not sustainable. Eventually, something breaks. Usually discipline, sometimes the whole plan. The people who succeed long-term have figured out how to make the right choices feel less wrong. Not good necessarily, not exciting, just tolerable, neutral, occasionally even satisfying in their own quiet way. They've bridged the gap between what makes sense logically and what registers emotionally. This is why some people can save effortlessly and others white-knuckle their way through every month. It's not about intelligence. It's not about values. It's about whether they've found a way to translate long-term benefit into present feeling. Whether they've hacked their own reward system or just learned to tolerate the discomfort without breaking. If you're still fighting yourself on this, if every good decision still feels like deprivation, you probably haven't found your model yet. You're running on pure discipline, and discipline is exhausting. It works for a while. It can work for a long time if you're stubborn enough, but it extracts a cost. It makes you resentful. It makes you feel like you're constantly denying yourself while everyone else lives freely. That's not a sustainable emotional state. Eventually, you'll either burn out or rebel or start making exceptions that become patterns. Not because you're weak, because fighting your own wiring is genuinely difficult, and nobody can do it indefinitely without some kind of internal support structure. So, if doing the right thing with money consistently feels wrong to you, that's useful information. It means your current approach is working against your psychology instead of with it. You're trying to force yourself into behavior your emotional system keeps rejecting. Something needs to change. Not necessarily what you're doing, but how you're thinking about what you're doing. Maybe it's finding a way to make saving feel like progress instead of restriction. Maybe it's giving yourself permission for small present luxuries that don't derail the larger plan. Maybe it's focusing on what you're building toward instead of what you're avoiding. Maybe it's surrounding yourself with people who are playing the same long game so you're not constantly comparing yourself to different rules. There's no universal answer because the emotional block is different for everyone, but the pattern is the same. When the right decision feels wrong, your brain is telling you something, not that the decision actually is wrong, but that the way you're framing it isn't working for you psychologically. And until you address that, you'll keep struggling. The goal isn't to make financial discipline feel as good as spending money. It won't. It can't. The immediate reward system is too strong, but it can feel neutral. It can feel like a reasonable trade-off. It can stop feeling like self-punishment, and that's enough. That's the difference between people who save successfully and people who try to save and eventually give up. You're not broken if this is hard. You're human. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's just designed for a different world with different time scales and different threats. You're trying to use ancient hardware to run modern software. Of course there are glitches. The question isn't whether it should be easier. It won't be. The question is whether you can find a way to make it tolerable enough that you keep doing it anyway. Not through sheer force of will, but through a mental model that makes the behavior feel less like fighting yourself and more like building something you actually want. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next.